I am super excited to be here with you today to talk about what leadership means from an AI perspective, leading in the age of AI. You know, as I was putting this presentation together, as we've joked 8 minutes ago, just kidding. It's really been it's been coming for a while. One of the things that I kept thinking, and one of the things that I've really thought a lot about in the last few weeks, is what a time to be alive. AI is everywhere. You cannot go to a conference, you can't open LinkedIn, you can't go into a meeting without it coming up. In fact, many of us have AI exhaustion. We hear people talking about it, and sometimes it's hard to tell, like, what is hype and what is real, and the pressure that we need to do something, that's very real. We all feel it. What I want to say about what I'm going to talk about today, though, is that this is not a technology session. It's not a demo. This is really about leadership. The pressure that I talked about, it is very real. But automation or the tool, that is not the first place that we stop. And that's what I want to focus on during the time that we have together. Are we really thinking about how work gets done? And this isn't just about legal work. It's about all of our work. I'm going to talk a little bit about this presentation and how I built it, because I want to give you some real practical ideas about how you should be using AI in your job for those of you who are not lawyers. I know we have some lawyers on the call. So it isn't just about legal work. It's really about how do we as leaders need to show up in the age of AI. Are we solving friction, or are we throwing technology on top of broken processes? So let's dig in. So what's happening right now? I go into firms and I hear very similar stories over and over again. There's a lot of tools. Sometimes, and very recently, I heard, I'll tell you two things that I ran into. I was doing strategic planning for a firm, and I said, tell me about your AI strategy right now. That was one of the things they wanted to talk about. And they said, well, we intentionally don't have an AI strategy. We have banned AI. And I said, okay. And one of the lawyers says, no one here uses AI. And I was like, okay, well, that's actually not true. So I mean, I hope that you don't actually think that people aren't using AI. He said, no, we have a strict policy that bans people from using it. I said, awesome. And I hope that you don't actually believe that people aren't using AI to get their work done. It's hard to ignore. That's one example. I was on a call not that long ago, and I asked a firm about their AI strategy, and one of the lawyers said, we don't have one. I will not play a part in the gutting of the profession. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. If I would have been thinking on my feet, I might have said something like, what if you could be involved in the shaping of the future of the profession? Because AI is going to play a big part in that. But most of the time, what I see is lots of tools. Everybody wants to know if they're behind, or if they're ahead of the curve. But I think everybody's kind of in the messy middle. And most firms who think they're really behind aren't as far behind as they think they are. Lots of firms who have bought tools, but no one's using them. Lots of firms who have spent a lot of money on tools, but people aren't using them. Maybe they've invested in Copilot, or they've thought about things like, how do we just put a pilot together? But everyone's struggling with adoption because we're not really intentional about how we're using it. We also have this issue about who owns it. So somebody says, you should just figure it out. And someone else goes and tries to figure it out, and they're not really sure what the right direction for the firm is. What do they need? Do you need a point solution? Do you need one of those big expensive ones? Should you just call your Westlaw or your Lexis rep and talk to them about AI? It's hard to figure it out when there isn't a strategy and there isn't ownership. So somebody has to own the AI initiatives. And then the last thing is getting involved early and really thinking about how to leverage AI as a leader is a compounding advantage. And when I say that, I mean the earlier you start, the more you build on what you started. but it's important to think about starting smart. So let's talk about what's changing. So the first thing here says speed. And when I say speed, I do not mean things are moving quickly. We all know that. Today's the slowest day of change that you'll ever experience in your life. What I mean by that is that the pace of change is fundamentally different now than it was. Do you remember the days when you bought a software program, you actually bought it and then you owned it? And every year you decided if you were going to do the upgrade or not? And sometimes you could skip a year and not do one upgrade after another upgrade. Do you remember those days? Well, now you get an upgrade every Thursday or every random day that you log in and get a pop-up from your cloud-based software program that says, welcome to version 14.6, click here to read about the new features. Most people just click on the X and close that. But the ability to develop, the ability to add features and functionality in software programs has never been faster. And it's only going to keep getting faster. We heard a story just a couple of days ago. Major legal software vendor was talking about developing a feature set. And in the old way of working, that feature set would have taken somewhere between 6 and 8 weeks to develop it and to do the quality control. And with the new AI development tools, they got it done in 3 days. It's massively changing how software gets developed. So speed is a big deal. The speed of change is a really big deal. It's also exhausting. So as leaders, one of our big jobs is how do we help people through this unprecedented rate of change? The pace of change being fundamentally different now than it was. And then the second thing is accessibility. Anyone with a browser has access. You don't have to worry about installing things on people's computers anymore. Maybe you wish you did have to worry about that, because then you could control what people get and what they don't get. I just heard a story about a client of ours who put all of these firewall provisions in place to stop certain AI tools from being used. Because even though you have a policy that says don't use them, you can still go to the website. But what they don't realize is it's just really easy to grab your phone and go do what you want to do and copy and paste it from your phone into your email. Like, it's really hard to prevent people from doing things. So training and education is the key there. We have to figure out how to make sure people understand that there are boundaries and guardrails. As leaders, that is our job. Accessibility makes things easy to get to for everyone. We have to teach them how to apply some common sense rules about what to use and when. And then the last thing is the pressure to act sometimes puts people in situations where they make decisions that don't make the most sense. You buy tools because it makes sense to, or someone was at a meeting and they heard that the firm down the road bought Copilot for everyone, and then someone comes back and says, we should buy Copilot for everyone. I'm not saying you should or shouldn't. I'm just saying that's not how you make decisions. Pressure without clarity. If you make a decision that is grounded in pressure to make a decision with no clarity on how you're going to use the tool, it just makes waste. Frustrated people, it makes people doubt the technology. It's a real struggle. It creates a lot of uncertainty. So pressure to act is not the right reason to act. And that has been the reason to act in the past about other kinds of technology. But let's talk about what's not changing. AI can give you 10 options in 10 seconds, but it can't tell you which one is right for your firm, your culture, and the politics in your firm. But it can absolutely give you 10 ideas in 10 seconds. The judgment piece is still you. Thinking through what you ask AI and how you take the advice it gives you. That is still you as the leader. The accountability piece. Anybody heard the term AI slop? Nothing drives me more crazy than anyone, it could be someone on my team, it could be a client, who sends me something that was clearly generated with AI. I don't have a problem with that. I think everybody should be using AI. But they haven't even read it. They haven't made it their own. They can't defend it. I had a situation not that long ago where someone internally sent me a document and I was on a one-on-one with them and I said, tell me more about this thing on page 4. And that person was stumped. Page 4. We turn to page 4 together. I share my screen. I say this. The person says to me, I'm not really sure what that meant. Right. Don't send me stuff like that. We as leaders don't just have to think about how we train people to use the tool. We have to train people that what they produce with the tool, the accountability for that falls on them, not on the tool. We can't be like, oh, sorry, AI wrote that, not me. That's not a good answer. And then the last one, AI is not your experience. As a leader, think about you know your partners, you know your clients, you know the last thing that blew up in your firm. You know about the politics that happen in your firm. You know about your strategy. You know about what you're thinking about for the future. That experience, when you feed that in, when you use that experience to help get to a better solution with AI, that is a leadership skill now. And that's what I think maybe a big takeaway from this is using AI responsibly is in fact a leadership skill. And when we hide behind AI, it's lazy. So yes, I know we can all create an employee manual if we wanted to. Michael Cohen's in the other room cringing with ChatGPT. We can just be like, hey, all of my employees are in the state of Illinois, the most complicated state that there is from an employment perspective. Can you go ahead and draft me up an employee manual? And then you could just like publish to PDF and say, here you go. And that would be incredibly irresponsible. Just because you can do something with AI doesn't mean that there aren't 3 or 4 or 10 or 20 things that you have to do after AI gives you your first draft. Well, you might have read about this study on LinkedIn. It was an MIT article that came out last year. 95% of AI projects fail. 95% of AI projects fail. Most of those projects are not failing because the tool doesn't do what it says it's going to do. Most of those are failing because leadership shows up too late. Leadership shows up when we're trying to salvage the project, not when we're thinking about what the project looks like. So when the leaders show up at tool selection only, that's another dangerous spot. That is not AI strategy. That's approving a purchase order. If the pattern is we buy a tool, we figure out what we're going to do with it, we wonder why no one uses it, and we blame the tool, nothing good comes from that. In fact, it puts all kinds of doubt in the people who really are interested in using the tool's head about our leadership skills and our leadership style and how we make decisions at our firm. And it's also it's not a software initiative. It's not a software implementation. It's not something that you can just say, IT is going to handle this for us. This is a change initiative that has to be owned by leaders. It's a leadership priority, and that's how we need to be thinking about it. And that's how I really believe that these kinds of initiatives need to be treated in our firms. So there is a pattern that we see, the leading with tools pattern. And it's actually a pattern that has been around for a long time. We used to call it shelfware. And if you've ever wondered where shelfware got its name, shelfware was the software program you bought and it came to you in a box. And instead of installing it and using it, you either installed it and didn't use it, or you never actually took the shrink wrap off the box and you put the box on a shelf. And then we called it shelfware instead of software, right? That pattern has been around for a long time. We buy tools, we don't use them. We find this $99 thing or we find this $399 thing and we say, oh, that's going to make my life better. And we buy it and we don't use it. The pattern around buying AI tools, the cost is much higher. And what we're seeing from a leading with the tools perspective is we're seeing a hodgepodge of tools that are purchased to do thing A, but were never actually designed to do that because we saw the flowery stuff and the flashy stuff in the demo. If we start with the tool, we are likely not going to get it right. If we flip over to the right side of things, we talk at the right side of the slide, and we talk about what are leaders doing. They're talking about friction. They're talking about where work slows down, what frustrates people. We're talking about what is it that we do over and over again. Maybe we think about what do our clients complain about? Maybe we think about what are the questions that we get over and over again? Maybe we think about what people spend the most time editing, but we look for things that are hard, things that repeat regularly, things that are high risk items. We dig into those friction areas. And for most firms, you have to do that practice group by practice group. What you end up finding when you don't do that and you just start with the tools is that AI is going to magnify for you whatever already exists. Let me give you an example. We just recently worked with a firm who bought an AI tool for their estate planning team. It was a disaster. They invested a lot of money. The lawyers that sat through the demo were like, that is going to solve some problems for us. There were some people on the team who were really excited about it. They get the tool. They get 4 or 6 hours of training on the tool. I'm sorry, but I don't think there is an AI tool that anyone should only get 4 or 6 hours of training on. But whatever, that's what they did. That's what they bought. That's what came with the package. And then a couple months later, the COO of the firm finds out that that tool has been abandoned. And that's like the 4th time that purchasing a point solution has happened for this firm, and they just can't figure out what's going wrong. So we're going to dig into the estate planning problem, right? Figure out what happened. So I talked to one of the lawyers on the estate planning team, and he said to me, Debbie, that was never going to work for us because it would have required us to all agree on using the same templates. I said, wait, when you were talking about using an AI tool, weren't you thinking about streamlining how things got done in the department? And he said, no, we thought that tool, that it was going to make it better for me. There are 4 lawyers on our team. We thought we were all going to be able to use it with our forms the way we wanted to use it. So I went back to the COO and I said, I don't think that there was ever any alignment on how a tool like that could help that team. Because they're actually not really a team. It's like 4 little estate planning law firms in that estate planning department. And none of them wanted to give any space, not even an inch, on streamlining how they got work done. And guess what? That had a ripple effect on so many other things. It was hard to work in that estate planning department because if you were a paralegal who was supporting 2 of the lawyers, you had to do this little mental swap every time you were working for this lawyer, these forms, this font, this language, these clauses, this everything, and you had to switch when you were working with another lawyer. That's exhausting and makes it really hard to work here. Now, the good news is we have recently had a great conversation with that firm about what compromise might look like. Because what we did is we had a leadership conversation with them first. We said, look, let's talk about what the ROI could be. Here's the friction. Here are the pain points. Here are the benefits of streamlining how you get your work done. Here are the benefits of having a way that this firm does estate planning. Could we get to a place where everyone was equally unhappy, right? Because we're not going to get to a place where 4 lawyers who are used to doing it their own way are happy. And I don't know that this problem is going to actually get solved yet, but I have a little bit of hope. But the point of all of this is, if we don't start with what would have to be different, how would we need to think differently about how our work gets done? in order to really leverage a tool like this, we just end up buying a bunch more shelfware that no one uses. And this firm, unfortunately, signed a 3-year contract with this tool. And I mean, could they get out of their contract? Maybe, but it's not going to just be easy to, call the 800 number and say, I'd like to stop using this. So the decisions have to be made ahead of time. We've got to figure out how, as leaders, we step in and help people think about how we get work done and how we lead with the friction and lead with the things that are hard. So oftentimes when I go into a firm, I'm dealing with 1 or 2, sometimes 3, sometimes all 5 of these personas, right? An anxious managing partner, someone who's saying, I know we have to do something, but I don't know what it is that we should do, and I'm worried that we're going to get it wrong. Or the overloaded leader, like many of you might feel that pain of being an overloaded leader, where someone says, hey, can you just go figure out this AI thing? Like you could just go figure out this thing, like you could just go figure out who we could call to come and fix our copier or something like that. It's so much bigger than that. So we're overloaded and we're trying to fit in an AI strategy. Or we have a frustrated IT director. Sometimes we actually have a completely uninterested IT director too. But the frustrated IT director has some answers, but nobody's really listening. Or we have a forward-thinking attorney, someone who's excited about AI and they're using it themselves and they're thinking about how it could really change their practice, but they can't get buy-in, they can't get the firm to agree. Then we have maybe some cautious dabblers who are curious, they're looking into it, but they're afraid to make a commitment. There's a lot of things that feed these challenges, and I want to dig into those and make sure we have some time to talk about the things that are feeding into why people are worried about this. But before we do that, I think that if I were to boil it down to think about the blockers, there are really 3 things, right? The first one is expertise. Lawyers are great at practicing law, but most of them aren't great at evaluating technology or running an innovation initiative or building AI strategies. And many firms, lots of people doing this for the first time. Many firms don't have the people in their offices to think through all of that. It's really challenging to just say, we're going to spend the next few weeks getting that expertise that we need to be able to do it. Or worse than that, they have a vendor that they trust and the vendor comes in and says, buy these 3 things. But again, we're back to starting with the tool. And that's where things can get really challenging. Then we have the authority gap. And the authority gap this is the one that I see all the time. We know what we need to do. Could be related to AI, but it could also be related to like 1,000 other things. We know what we need to do. We don't have the authority to do that. We want to drive change, but we have people who are just roadblocks to driving change. And that kind of experience that many executive business leaders have in a law firm is incredibly frustrating. We know what we need to do. We've talked about what we need to do. We've talked about what we need to do ad nauseum. I don't have the authority to actually click the button, write the check, do whatever to make it happen. And we just keep talking and we just keep staying stuck. And then the third one is the execution gap. This is maybe the biggest one. And the biggest thing that I see as the opportunity that is looking straight back at all of you when you're looking at it, and that is, how do we execute? How do we think about taking something from an idea to actually in practice? How do we get the support that we need to make sure that we can execute? Many firms have no shortage of strategy ideas, no shortage of initiatives that they want to take on, but getting the buy-in that they need, whether that be from a paralegal, whether that be from a managing partner, whether that be from a practice group lead, whether that just be from a group of people who say they don't have time to focus on an initiative, can be really frustrating to know what you need to do, but not have the ability to execute. So we've got to have expertise, we've got to have authority, and we have to be able to execute. Those are the big blockers. Now, this is something that I think, if I were going to say, like, focus on one thing, it's this. The word that matters more than anything else is believers. We need believers. AI adoption is not a training problem. We could always do more training. I don't care if we're talking about Microsoft Word, and many of you who have heard me speak before, I say that all the time. People would just learn how to use Word and Outlook. It could revolutionize how they get their work done, just those two little things. So I'm always an advocate for more training. Never, ever, ever stop learning. But AI adoption is more of a belief problem than it is a training problem. It's more of a belief or a believer problem than it is a tool problem. We have to figure out how to create believers, people that believe that there is a better way to get work done. If you're focused on ROI from an AI tool, you will not get it without believers. If there are people in your firm who believe there's a better way to work, if there are believers in your firm who know that law firm life does not have to be this hard, you will gain traction. What kills belief? Rollouts that don't have a why, generic training, mandatory adoption, measuring logins. That stuff doesn't create believers. What creates believers is find a practice group, figure out what their specific friction is, show them a tool that can solve their problem, anoint them as your evangelists, let the word spread. Your skeptics, all we need from them is curiosity. You don't turn skeptics into believers. You turn skeptics into curious people who are wondering what's going on. It creates momentum that no training program is ever going to create. That's it. Believers starts with one practice group, one real problem, one visible win, and everything else follows from there. This is the uncomfortable truth, the uncomfortable questions. AI is simply exposing what we've been avoiding for a long, long time. The old model worked. I will not deny that the old model worked. The old model is still working in a lot of places. I have had people say to me, we are making money hand over fist. Why do we need to change that right now? The old model worked. The old model is excellent lawyer, plus a book of business, plus some influence, success. Multiple amazing lawyers with books of business and influence, an amazing law firm. We rewarded talent and hustle. But that strategy that has worked since the beginning of time also built silos. Origination equals power. Consensus feels so much safer than clarity. And that's something that we have to be thinking about. Partners were never trained to manage a business. I think it's so funny when I have these conversations with managing partners when they're willing to say things to me like I got elected to this. I don't really know what I'm doing. And then I just like play this little movie in my head and I think, well, you're only going to do this for 3 years and then someone else is going to sit in this chair and who knows, they might be great, they might not be great. Like this idea that we're rotating leaders that are supposed to be thinking about strategy and execution and all the things that we've been talking about, and also thinking about building a new way of getting work done and building a new business model. Originators built the last era, but what's going to build the next one? How do we think about leadership of law firms in the future when AI is pulling on all of these threads that really, really matter? It's pulling on the billable hour. It's pulling how we think about value and origination and what differentiates us. I've been talking a lot lately about so many companies, so many businesses, so many law firms are run on heroics. Heroic efforts to get things across a finish line. What the future is going to require from us as leaders is building systems that do not require heroics. And some of your young lawyers can see the difference there because they want more clarity. They don't want chaos. There's a lot of chaos. Heroics create chaos. It's still important to be a great lawyer. It's still important to be a brilliant lawyer, but it's not going to be sufficient. This is what matters more than ever. Clarity before technology. Find the friction. Otherwise, AI is going to magnify your mess. Somebody needs to own it. Everybody's working on it means nobody's working on it. Know who's advising you. Vendor advice is structurally limited. You wouldn't ask a Ford dealer if you should buy a Toyota. So when your insert name here of software vendor rep comes in and tells you that their AI tool is going to solve all of your problems, that is actually their job to say that. Could be true, probably not true, because I really do believe that none of us are going to rely on one AI tool ever. There will be multiple tools. So when you're talking to a vendor, you have to be really careful. We have to ask questions, and hard questions now. We have to think about not a year from now, but what about 1 month from now? How are we going to think about this differently? We can't keep punting to the next partner retreat. We can't keep punting until we can budget for it next year. We have to be thinking about how to ask the hard questions right now. I'm going to give you a book recommendation. This is the first book, I think it was the first book about AI that I ever read. And a couple of weeks ago, I was on a cruise and I brought this book with me, and I didn't read it from cover to cover, but I revisited lots of the concepts in there. And it's a book called The AI-Driven Leader by Jeff Woods. Chelsea will pop the link in the chat. It changed how I think. It changed how I work. It changed how I lead. It changed how we serve our clients. I'd highly recommend that you buy that book. It's called The AI-Driven Leader. That is what we all need to become. And that is a never stop learning game. If any of you are Claude fans, what Claude has done in the last 30 days has blown my mind, like beyond anything I could have imagined. And I don't do legal work. I'm talking about finance work. I'm talking about this PowerPoint presentation. I'm talking about roles and responsibilities. I'm talking about how we think about accountability and holding standards. I'm about strategy, about innovation offerings. It's changed everything, and drastically in the last 30 days. We all need to be AI-driven leaders. Here's where I'll leave you. AI is the lemon. It showed up uninvited. It's a little messy. It's kind of uncomfortable, and it's forcing lots of changes. And many of you are thinking, I did not ask for this. But that's what lemons do. Leadership is the lemonade. That's what this conference has always been about, right? It's taking the hard stuff and making something better with it. And the last thing I'll leave you with is the modern law firm was built by rainmakers, brilliant lawyers who could produce at the highest level and bring in business. That model built empires. And a lot of you in this room have been part of that. And that era is not going to end abruptly. Rainmaking still matters, but it's not enough anymore. The firms that thrive from here will be led by people who can do things at a bigger level, at a bigger scale. People who are thinking about systems. The new era is going to be built by leaders and AI-driven leaders. And I know that you can be one of them. Even if it terrifies you, I know that you can be one of them. There are so many resources out there that are available to help you navigate this path. I hope you've gotten something out of this. I hope you are thinking about how you can incorporate AI, if you aren't already, into your day-to-day life. And I hope that if you already are doing it, that you're thinking about how you can do it even bigger, how you can do it at scale, how you can start thinking about bringing that system thinking into your firm and start noticing every act of heroics. I'd like to think of everybody with like a big Superman shirt on or wearing a cape, and you're like, yeah, that would have never gotten done if I didn't slap my cape on and make sure it got done. What if we didn't have to be heroes all the time? That's really the challenge. And that is what being an AI-driven leader can do.